On March 26th, the Seoul High Court in South Korea delivered a second-instance verdict, overturning the initial ruling and acquitting Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the largest opposition party, the Democratic Party of Korea, of charges related to violations of the Public Official Election Act. This decision has provisionally cleared the path for Lee Jae-myung to run for the South Korean presidency. However, it's only a preliminary step, as the prosecution immediately announced its intention to appeal the case to the Supreme Court. Theoretically, the question of whether Lee can successfully run for president remains uncertain. Under South Korean law, the Supreme Court is required to issue a third-instance judgment within 3 months of the second-instance verdict, that is, by June 26. If the acquittal is upheld, Lee Jae-myung's political future will remain unhindered. Conversely, a guilty verdict would not only cost him his parliamentary seat, but also bar him from running for office for 10 years. The situation took a significant turn on April 4th with the highly anticipated ruling on the impeachment of President Yoon Suk Yeol. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of impeachment, removing him from office. This development has all but guaranteed Lee Jae-myung's candidacy. Why? After a president is removed from office, a general election must be held within 60 days, which means the upcoming election is scheduled for June 3rd. Significantly, this date falls before the final judgment in Lee Jae-myung's case. The approach here mirrors how the United States handled the legal issues surrounding Donald Trump. On April 4, 2023, Trump became the first current US president to face criminal charges when he appeared at a Manhattan criminal court. As is well known, Trump was entangled in numerous legal battles initiated by the Democratic Party ahead of the election. However, in cases as weighty as those potentially affecting his eligibility to run, US courts were reluctant to render quick judgments. Such a move would risk giving the impression of judicial interference in politics, severely polarizing society and sparking widespread controversy. Thus, US courts repeatedly postponed the proceedings. On May 30, 2024, a jury found Trump guilty on all 34 counts of first-degree falsifying business records. Trump's team immediately appealed, and the second-instance judgment was postponed until November 26, 2024, after the election. Following Trump's successful re-election, the judgment was delayed again. Finally, on January 10, 2025, a New York State Supreme Court judge issued a final ruling unconditionally releasing Trump, in accordance with the policy that sitting presidents cannot be prosecuted. The same logic applies to the South Korean court's handling of Lee Jae-myung's case. The South Korean prosecution indicted Lee in 2022 on charges of violating the Public Official Election Act, accusing him of falsely denying acquaintance with a key figure in a state corruption case during his 2021 presidential campaign and making false statements in Parliament. Similar to Trump's hush money case, this is essentially an electoral offense. As the saying goes, the person who tied the knot should be the one to untie it. The best course is to let voters decide through the ballot, rather than leaving the decision to the courts. In short, political cases are better resolved by the electorate. If a candidate wins the election, the case can be set aside. If not, their political future is in jeopardy. According to the latest South Korean public opinion poll, Lee Jae-myung, a leading candidate for the next presidency, continues to top the list with a 46.1% approval rating. On the side of the ruling People Power Party, acting President and Prime Minister Hon Duk-soo ranks second with 10.6%, while former Daegu Mayor Hong Joon-pyo comes in third with 9%. Currently, both the Democratic Party and the People Power Party are conducting internal primaries. Lee Jae-myung's nomination within the Democratic Party is all but assured. The probability is as close to 100% as it can get. The only factor that could potentially prevent him from becoming the party's presidential nominee is himself. In a few days, on April 27th, Lee Jae-myung will be officially confirmed as the Democratic Party's presidential candidate. In contrast, the People Power Party's internal competition is in chaos. On April 22nd, based on the performance of 8 candidates in the polls, the number of participants was whittled down to 4. The polls, conducted by 5 survey agencies between April 21st and 22nd among 4,000 respondents, determined the 4 successful candidates, Hong Joon-pyo, Kim Moon-hyo, Hon Dong-hoon, and An Cheol-soo. Roh Kyung-won, Yong Sang-ya, Lee Chul-woo, and Eugene Bok were eliminated. Among the 4 finalists, Hong Jun-pyo is the aforementioned former Daegu mayor. Kim Moon-yo served as the Minister of Employment and Labor in Yoon Suk-yeol's government. Han Dong-hoon, who previously served as Minister of Justice in Yoon's administration, later became the leader of the People Power Party. And Cheol-soo is a member of the National Assembly. The next phase, scheduled for April 29th, will further reduce the number of candidates to 2. In this round, both party member votes and poll performance will be considered, with each factor carrying a 50% weight. The primary process will conclude on May 3rd, when one of the remaining 2 candidates will be officially selected as the party's presidential nominee. The People Power Party's primary is delayed compared to the Democratic Party for 2 main reasons. First, Lee Jae-myung faces no serious internal competition within the Democratic Party, while the People Power Party lacks a clear front-runner. Second, the People Power Party refrained from initiating primary preparations until Yoon Suk-yeol was removed by the Constitutional Court, an issue that did not affect the Democratic Party. The real challenge for the People Power Party is that, regardless of which of the 4 finalists becomes the presidential nominee, they will struggle to compete with Lee Jae-myung. Additionally, Lee Jun-hee, the presidential candidate of the Reformist New Party, has yet to withdraw from the race. During the previous presidential election, Lee Jun-hee, then the leader of the People Power Party, played a crucial role in Yoon Suk-yeol's victory. Later, he split from the party leadership, founded the Reformist New Party, and voted in favor of Yoon's impeachment last year along with An Cheol-soo. If Lee Jun-hee participates in the upcoming election, he is likely to siphon off votes from the People Power Party's candidate. Currently, on gambling websites, the probability of Lee Jae-myung becoming the next president is 79%. Hong Jun-pyo has a 6% chance, Han Dong-hoon 5%, and Han Duk-soo 4%. Among these individuals, Han Duk-soo is not actually running for president, yet there is still money being wagered on his potential victory. Most of this betting money was likely placed when Yoon Suk-yeol had just been impeached and Han Duk-soo had not yet clearly indicated his intention to run. Certainly, some conservative figures believe that acting President Han Duk-soo represents the greatest common divisor. They think that Han Duk-soo has a moderate and stable stance and is well versed in trade with the United States, making him a suitable candidate. Some lawmakers have even publicly stated that they hope Han Duk-soo will not shirk the demands of the times. However, from an electoral perspective, Han Duk-soo, born in 1949, is a technical official lacking in political charisma. Pushing him forward as a candidate would be tantamount to handing the victory to Lee Jae-myung on a silver platter. Next, let's discuss how Lee Jae-myung might approach North Korea and other neighboring countries if he is successfully elected president. Throughout the various transitions in South Korean politics, there have generally been 2 frameworks for foreign policies. One is pro-US and pro-Japan, and the other is pro-US and pro-North Korea. Yoon Suk-yeol is a representative of the first framework, and his diplomatic actions over the past few years are well known, so there's no need to elaborate on them here. Moon Jae-in and Lee Jae-myung are representatives of the second framework. They advocate an independent and balanced foreign policy centered on national interests. The so-called balance means not leaning too heavily in one direction and avoiding a camp confrontation between the US, Japan, South Korea on one side and China, Russia, and North Korea on the other. The core of a national, interest-centered policy is to promote the reunification of the Korean Peninsula. This is achieved by assisting North Korea's economic development and facilitating the establishment of diplomatic relations between North Korea and the United States to resolve the North Korean nuclear issue, with the ultimate goal of achieving the reunification of the peninsula and the rejuvenation of the nation. As a general rule, South Korea's North Korea policy is highly influenced by the United States' North Korea policy. For example, Moon Jae-in, who was pro-US and pro-North Korea, managed to improve North-South diplomacy during the relatively North Korea-friendly tenure of Donald Trump. However, during Joe Biden's term, he faced difficulties. On the other hand, Yoon Suk-yeol, who is pro-US and pro-Japan, thrived during Biden's term but encountered a crisis soon after Trump took office again. Of course, as political figures operating within an electoral system, any significant stance taken by Moon Jae-in, Lee Jae-myung, etc., has the support of public opinion behind it. For instance, their pro-North Korea stances indicate that there is a strong pro-North Korea sentiment within South Korea. However, compared to his predecessors, Lee Jae-myung has a more pronounced anti-Japan stance. He has publicly advocated for the abolition of the South Korea-Japan Comfort Women Agreement and the South Korea-Japan Military Intelligence Protection Agreement signed by the Park Geun-hye government. On November 14, 2016, Lee Jae-myung posted on social media regarding the signing of the South Korea-Japan Military Intelligence Protection Agreement. He stated that Japan not only invaded the Korean peninsula in the past but also continuously provokes South Korea over the issue of Dokdo Tokushima. Japan is actually an enemy of South Korea. If Park Geun-hye signed this agreement and provided intelligence to Japan without limitations, then she would not be South Korea's president, but a Japanese spy. In 2023, Lee Jae-myung attracted attention when he went on a hunger strike to protest Japan's discharge of nuclear wastewater. In a 2025 interview with The Washington Post, Lee Jae-myung acknowledged that South Korea and Japan need to cooperate. However, he also said that South Korea cannot back down on unresolved historical grievances, including territorial disputes and the fight for compensation for Korean laborers who were forced to work for Japanese companies during the colonial period. He remarked, "I think Japan should solve these problems like Germany did. Germany has seriously reflected on its history and made earnest efforts to ensure that history does not repeat itself, but Japan has not. So, how does Lee Jae-myung view China, and how will he handle the China-South Korea relationship?" Recently, there have been rumors that Lee Jae-myung is showing signs of changing his stance towards China. In particular, during a program on April 15th, Lee Jae-myung commented on the China-South Korea relationship. He said that currently, while China should bear some of the responsibility for the cooling of Sino-South Korean relations, although China has lifted the sanctions imposed after the VUD incident in the economic field, there are still some intangible sanctions that South Korea can sense, and this is one of the reasons for the current contradictions. At the same time, he said that in order to contain China, the United States might take the initiative to engage in dialogue with North Korea, which could be an excellent opportunity for South Korea to ease its relations with North Korea. Once these remarks were made, all sectors of South Korean society were filled with various speculations, believing that there would be significant changes in his approach to dialogue. Of course, some people think that this is just a campaign strategy for Lee Jae-myung. First of all, for Lee Jae-myung, the top priority now is to successfully complete the election and be elected as the next president. After Yoon Suk Yeol was impeached, some of his supporters became part of the swing voter group. During his tenure as the leader of the Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung's political inclination could be seen as friendly towards China, and he was even labeled as flattering China, which has become a target for his opponents. Therefore, at this crucial moment of the election, facing the wavering swing voters, Lee Jae-myung cannot afford to ignore them. In order to win the votes of this swing group, he has to adopt an ambiguous stance on the China issue. Once Lee Jae-myung is actually elected president, he will surely clarify his policy tone towards China. However, we should not have overly high expectations. Even if Lee Jae-myung is elected, he will not make significant strides in improving the China-South Korea relationship, as he still has to consider the stance of the United States.